Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Bench. I am your host, Brandon Stemwedel. Last time out we discussed the second of three dimensions of coaching, the mental side of coaching, emphasizing on the goal setting for athlete and team success. Today we are going to wrap up the third and final dimension, which is the heart of the athlete. I am happy to have Erik and Cal on to examine this dimension and why it is so important. Erik and Cal, glad to have you back.
Thanks, Brandon. Good to be with you.
All right. So let's dive into it. What is heart and the spirit side of the 3D coaching, and how is that an aspect of that coaches need to have in the complete side of coaching?
I would say the heart is the core of the person, and like the physical core, the midsection, all of that, it connects everything. So lower body strength is connected to upper body strength and application through your core. Okay, make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So the heart is the core. It's the thing that integrates everything for the athlete. It shows up in a variety of topics. So the first one I think is identity. So the person's own sense of who they are. So who am I? And then the next one would be purpose. What am I supposed to do? What's the meaning or purpose for life or this activity? And I think character is the next big one, in that's like, how do I carry out who I am in the context of doing what I'm supposed to do? So it's kind of the how. Significance, self-worth, but those are more derivative of the first three, I think. So when we're talking about it, we're going even more abstract and non-physical than we were with the second dimension. So, as you move from the first through the second and third dimensions, you're going from the concrete, physical, hands-on stuff to the abstract, invisible component of who we are as people. And it fundamentally deals with beliefs and values and self-conscious and will. Basically, those are the core elements of what we're dealing with. And typically in sport, this is the domain of sport chaplains. That's the primary professional that deals with it. Like the mind would be sports psychologists, and the body would be your strength and conditioning people and that kind of thing. Those are the specialists in the system. So and I'd say parents, this is really the parents' domain as well. You think about youth, the parents have the biggest role in forming those things for the athlete.
And this, Erik, this is why you said in I think the first episode that volunteer coaches in particular, they hit the second and third dimension primarily. Because why is it that they're able to hit this dimension in particular more so than like another coach like you and I?
Yeah, I'd preface it by saying not every youth coach is, but it seems like, in our experience, I've had experiences where coaches are really good in the second and third because they really care about kids. And it comes back to the why, again, of coaching. A lot of the why for youth coaches are, just love coaching kids, want to be around kids. I mean, maybe your kid is coaching, and so there's already a relationship there. Very few coaches at the lower youth levels are in it for competition or to live out some sort of unfulfilled sport experience, like the former athletes who are trying to live out their sport career through coaching, and that's how they fulfill that component.
Careful now.
Yeah. So I think that there's just they see kids as kids, and they let kids play for the most part, because it's almost like Cal said a little bit. I mean, Cal is, when he wants to find information, he's really good at finding it. And so there's a knowledge that's built up. But for a lot of coaches who they're not great at X's and O's because they just want kids to play. And Cal kind of talked about that. This gets into what sport should be inherently, is play. We've flipped language, and we use a lot of language of work instead of play. So I think that's really why youth sports, whenever we're working with the Youth Basketball, Rookie Basketball Association and Salvation Army, the first thing I do is I tell the kindergarten coaches are going to do the kindergarten league, to raise their hands, commission them almost to be like, what a great opportunity you have. I'd say 99% of the kids who are playing kindergarten basketball, right, this is their first team sport experience, and you get to be their coach. Like, how great is that? You know, that's what an honor. And that should be the mentality of those coaches is at that level. It's about the kids. It's about having fun. It's about introducing them to the game. It's not about competition. It's not about winning. So again, not perfect. And that's why when we talk about hard stuff, when we talk about FCA, 3D coaching, why I coach, is because when that's what's broken about sport in a lot of ways, is the coaches who don't have that sort of framework of play and fun and joy and what sport was created to be.
So kind of tapping into that a little bit, you know, as a coach and as a volunteer coach, you have to be a part of some type of organization. Does that fall a little bit on the organization of how, you know, we've kind of talked about core values, right? Is there a lack of core values, or is there a lack of direction of core values to not allow them to have that heart almost, or to kind of make everyone on the same page? Do you see where I'm getting at with that?
Absolutely, because this was my first assignment on staff with FCA. Salvation Army is for those who don't know, is a Christian organization. They're rooted in the church, and so one of the first things Cal's first kind of, he had made the connection, and then he kind of almost assigned me to Chris Mallett at the Salvation Army Rookie Basketball Association. She is the case study for this, for sure, at the youth level and beyond. We've used her as a model for a lot of things because she took over an organization that was reeling from a sexual abuse kind of scandal. One of the coaches had been accused and convicted of sexual abuse of a player. Mm-hmm. And it completely rocked, you know, the community and obviously the league. And so she took over this broken youth basketball league and completely reformatted it and fit it in with identified core values of both the Salvation Army and the league. And so we use something called the marks of excellence, which are the fruit of the Spirit, you know, in the Bible. And those were, we renamed them in a way and then gave them definitions that use, and that's what she built the league on. So absolutely, core values are important in that organizational structure for sure. And she's the case study for that, because everything is built on the marks. And she's doing 3-dimensional coaching organizationally at a very high level. And like I said, now they've gone from just K through 4th grade rec basketball to basically running the entire city rec basketball program. So
K through 8.
Yeah, 300 families, you know, participating.
Wow.
I mean,
more than that.
There's 24 to 40 teams depending on participation. So that's a lot of coaches. That's a lot of assistant coaches, because they have a rule that 2 adults have to be present at all times to kind of, it's called safe from harm, and that's to hedge any sort of inappropriate behavior and that coach. But that's
right.
So that's a lot of people that she has taken on and she's training, but she's used her core values to build all of that off of. So absolutely, for sure, 100%, it's rooted in those.
One of the things you have to realize is that the phrase core values doesn't really define things. I mean, everybody has core values. You know, I value winning and getting ahead. So, you know, I can build my program around that. And you see that happen in club sports as coaches realize that if they want to advance their career, they have to win. So they'll win by any means possible to move up and get their career launched, in a sense.
Yeah, I think that core values aren't result based.
Well, yeah, no, I'm just saying that core values, I would argue I can have core values and still be a horrible 3-dimensional coach. You're not a 3-dimensional coach at all.
Right.
So, you know, and so it gets back to how do you understand competition? And competition, from I guess our perspective is basically it's the process of playing or challenging with another person or an opponent with the goal of striving for excellence. So it's not about me beating you, it's about me growing as a person, as a competitor, as an athlete, to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do that together, and no matter who wins, we can both be successful in getting better. And so it's that striving for excellence together is really what competition is. And you look at the development of top athletes, they've always had to have somebody pushing them. They're somebody they're striving with and together, really. And often they're teammates, but often they're other teams that make them get better, because you got to get past that team to be excellent.
So would you say at times, like, yes, this may be the third dimension, but doesn't it all start here? I mean, you're talking about the core of everything here. Like, there's got to be a drive. So how do you, like, obviously all three of these kind of triangulate together, but you're talking about the core of the person now. This isn't really about necessarily the team, but it's about the individual, correct? Or both?
It's both. I think it's both.
Okay.
I mean, when Erik's talking about their core values and their culture, it's a group thing, but it's really driven out of the heart of the coach. And I would say that almost all teams are built out of the heart of the coach. They're the ones that are setting the tempo. It's their core values that are being pushed, and all the players figure it out pretty quickly. You know what coach cares about. You can't fool them, and kids are that same way with parents. You know, you may say you're about this, but this is what you're really about. You know.
So how often does, we're talking about the core values and the core of a person or the team. Erik, you said that this is like a parent's domain, in particular. So how do you wrap them involved in this? So I think we said in the last episode, like the spotlight type thing where you're individually doing them, but you're also doing the home visits as well. How else can we do that?
Yeah, I would say it should be the parent's role.
Yeah.
Traditionally, it's the parent's role because the parents typically drive the belief system. So again, what Cal was touching on is your core values are a reflection of your belief system. So for me, my core values flow out of my faith.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they're clearly defined, they're clearly explained. So when I say Hunter Pride and use the acronym PRIDE, we know what that means. It's a 5 core values that shape our program and that we're always talking about. So traditionally, those belief systems have come from parents. But when there's a breakdown in the family structure, there's broken homes. There's a lot of brokenness in our community that we serve at Denfeld, and so that role now becomes the role of the coach. And so you can do that, like I said, in a parents meeting. Hopefully you have parents attending. My first parents meeting that we did was 50-50. So you're not going to reach every parent. Cal talked about the home visit as a way of connecting with the student athlete in a way that shows them that you care about them as a person, which then motivates them away. When we're talking about third dimension stuff, we're talking about all in athletes, right? So we use the term all in, or I want you to give me everything you got. Players aren't going to do that to a coach who's just coaching the first dimension. They're motivated by a coach who cares about them, and it's shown that. So that's the home visit. So I would say traditionally it's been the parent, and as much as you can, you bring the parents in, because again, traditionally they've shaped the belief system of student athletes. But by the time they get to high school, or especially college and pros for sure, they've developed their own belief system. And so understanding their heart, who they are as a person, is very, very important. That answer your question?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, again, we're talking about, laying down bricks and laying down foundations to not just settle for where they are now, but also to increase other values from other people, right? That's what creates that relationship base that we're having. Jumping a little bit into that, Erik, you've talked about in the past, in either the first episode or the second episode, of that entitlement piece. So with like when I keep thinking of a core, I keep thinking of, this is like the heart, just like the heart beating. And when you have blockages and stuff like that to prevent the heart from functioning, how do you try and bring the heart back up again? How do you kind of have that surgical piece to get rid of the cancerous pieces of the core? I know.
Heart surgery is major surgery, right? There's a reason why it's a vital organ. It's necessary. Cal does a really good job in his presentations. He uses circles to show balance, and then when the circles intersect, you see the core. You've probably seen the diagram. And when those circles, he does a good job of expanding the circles and shrinking the circles. And when you see the heart circle really, shrunk, you see disproportionate athletes. And so I think that is the hard part is doing major surgery. This is this is why a lot of coaches don't coach in the third dimension, because it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of a relationship to coach in the third dimension. You really have to know your players. You really have to care about them in a way that, to be quite honest, a lot of coaches just don't have time or don't want to put the time in to do that relational work. I remember when we talked about, and I haven't done it, this is how hard it is, but doing home visits for a football team is 80 to 100 visits. Mm-hmm. You can break that down into coaches, but that's a daunting task to think about how much time and effort it'd be to do one second dimension practical thing to help motivate your kids. So I think that's why you see that three-dimensional coaching is rare. There's coaches who are great in 2 dimensions, and then they get to the third and they don't have the capacity to coach in this way, or they don't know how.
Yeah. Well, the coach has to develop the skills, and you have to develop eyes that can see the invisible. So most coaches' biggest problems are the negative character traits of their players. So players are going to exhibit problem behaviors, and then it stops you. You have to address it before it infects the whole team. So selfishness would be an example. Player that will only play for their own benefit and won't serve anybody else on the team in how they play. They won't defend. They won't share the ball. And that affects everybody. And pretty soon you have a whole team that won't defend and won't share the ball.
Right.
And no matter how skilled they are, it's an ineffective team. And that's a character trait, a character skill that has to be addressed. So you have to coach in the third dimension, and if you don't coach there, you're going to get pushed there eventually. So it's more helpful to be proactive rather than reactive. And so from my perspective, the best way to do that is to help a coach understand, go back to the physical aspect of the game, that the game is demanding certain physical skills and traits for the player, posing problems that have to be solved with those skills and traits. And the coach knows how to teach those skills, and there's big categories, and then there's specific skills, and they have all kinds of training activities to do that, drills and small-sided games and all those kinds of things to address those issues. And then we talked about the mental skills that are being demanded. So perseverance, for instance, learning a new skill. Well, how do you teach perseverance while you're teaching this new skill? You're going to fail, but you got to keep trying, and you can connect that concept into it while you're helping motivate them. So you got the motivational skill and the third dimension skill, heart skill of perseverance. You can teach them all simultaneously on the field, and you're addressing the heart while you're addressing the body. So that's helping connect things. To me, that's the best way to make sure it gets addressed on a consistent basis. And then you can highlight certain things. So you can say this player has really worked hard. You can highlight their effort. They're persevering. They haven't gotten a skill yet, but they're persevering. They're continuing to try. And so you can affirm the character skill that you're trying to teach. And then you can push it into life skills, and go beyond the game, which you had mentioned the last segment was, life skills. So soccer demands ball control, ball skills. Here's a skill, pull back or step over or whatever you want. It takes time to learn that. You need to have motivation to continue. You need the ability to persevere through failure. Okay, where does life demand perseverance? Where does life demand that? Well, now you can start talking about, and especially as kids move up into high school, they're starting to figure that stuff out. That okay, I need to figure out how to persevere through some difficulty or whatever. I call it demands of the game, and it's for me, it's been a helpful way of seeing things.
Right.
You break it down, you can see it better.
Yeah, you got to call it out when you see it. So I think, again, I'm going to use Chris Mallett as the example when she talks about, so love is the foundational core value of the Rookie Basketball Association. Sacrificial acts that benefit others.
Yeah.
Okay, what does love look like in basketball? Passing the ball, simple. If anybody's been to a youth basketball game, kindergarten, first, second grade, it's kid gets the ball, hopefully dribbles down the court, but sometimes just travels down the court and they shoot the ball. There's no passing involved. We're inherently selfish in that way, right? So sacrifice looks like diving after a loose ball, going after a rebound. So she's defining, the demands of the game and connecting them to the mark and calling that out in practice. So how do we do that in football? We do it the same way in our practices. When we see a core value like perseverance, like Cal said, being shown in practice, you have to call it out and say, this is what we're talking about when we talk about perseverance. And then one of the things that I ran into last year is there's a head knowledge and a heart knowledge, right? So my guys are really good at being able to define, what our core values are. But when the rubber hit the road, were we really living them out in a game and beyond? And those were conversations you'd have after practice, after a scrimmage, maybe post game, where you would highlight some areas where, hey guys, we got hammered in the first half. It's 22-0. We came out and we persevered the second half, and the game ended up 30-14. Like, that's what perseverance looks like. Going through some hard situations in order to grow stronger. That's the definition of perseverance in our program. So, and then what Cal was talking about too, I think when we go through 3D, we call it the journey, right? Because this is the journey that these coaches are on. And they have to go through it first. One of the quotes of one of the 3D founders was, don't take somebody through a land that you haven't kind of already navigated. So if you haven't done the work as a coach to yourself to understand your journey, like I said, Joe Ehrmann's book, Inside Out Coaching, should be mandatory reading. In fact, it is somewhat mandatory because a lot of his material Minnesota State High School League is using in their head coach certification class. Mm-hmm. So if you go to that class, a lot of it's Inside Out Coaching and 3D coaching. It's built in. So you already have this league using this language, but if a coach isn't going to go through this journey on their own, then they're not going to be able to do this in front of their team. So I think part of that is going through that journey first.
That's what makes it so hard. I was going to add to what you were talking about, love, is that in soccer, one of the things is trying to get kids to move without the ball, and so when a player has a ball and they get kind of pinned, somebody needs to help them by showing, creating an option. And sometimes it's just making a long run. So you create space for a teammate, and you may never touch the ball, but the fact that you made an overlapping run has created space for the person with the ball, who can then beat an opponent and get a chance to score a goal. So that 60-yard run from an outside back is an act of love, is a positive character trait that a coach could affirm in a review of a game that really points at the whole idea that we're building character. The whole idea of the character.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to coach the heart, you have to push into character, purpose, and identity. And that lays the foundation for life skill and transferring everything that you're doing as a coach with your team or with individuals into life.
Mm.
And this, then you think about, if you're just impacting the athletes for the time that they're playing, you have a very limited impact.
Mm.
But if you can go into the third dimension and you're hitting character, and character is just doing, it's decision making, really, doing the right
Mm-hmm.
thing. You can then move into a lifelong impact, and it will push into the next generation because it'll eventually affect how they live marriage and how they live, how they parent. So when you're doing that, you're having a lifelong impact on people that's intergenerational as well. So that makes
Right.
all the time and energy in coaching worth it. If it's just for the game, you might as well say, I don't think it's worth it. Just
Yeah,
for
there's a lot of that.
Not much. It's
No.
not that helpful.
Beyond the Bench is sponsored by BiPro, the ideal lifestyle choice for athletes and health enthusiasts, by providing clean protein without artificial ingredients or sugars. Whether you're looking for a pre- or post-workout supplement or a quick drink on the go, visit motisports.com to receive 25% off your next BiPro item.
So talking about all of this too, so you have the first, second, and third dimension. Okay. What if I'm a coach and I'm listening to this and I'm like, well, I need all three dimensions to be the most complete coach. But what if you just maybe do 20% in the first dimension and 20% in the second dimension and the rest in 60% in the third dimension? Is that creating the best overall coach?
Yeah, that's where when you take Cal's circle diagram, again, you expand that first dimension where a lot of coaches just live in, and shrink the other two. It's just you're disproportionate. So yeah, you're not realistic.
Yeah, you get an example is if you just coach the first dimension and you don't coach the second and third dimension, you're not going to get at issues of identity and purpose. If you take away the third dimension, you don't get character, you don't get identity and purpose. You're just coaching for skills. That's the only thing you really, and when you grow the physical circle, you can grow it out, you're going to get better skill, but if you don't address the mind, you're going to be limited. You increase the mind, you're going to get a lot more sports skill. If you add the spirit and grow that circle, then you start getting into character, identity, and purpose. And when we go back to understanding that results come from the process, which come from character, you now have hooked into the driver for growth. And it all comes from, one of the biggest limiting factors on growth is the lack of imagination on the part of a player. You think about it. They don't have the imagination to see what's possible. And that comes from beliefs, which comes with, well, who am I?
Who am I? What am I doing?
And what am I doing? And some kids, they see themselves, I'm a soccer player, I'm a center back, or in youth, I'm a forward. Everybody wants to be a forward. Well, that's how they see themselves. Well, you can't get them to defend because they're a forward, and forwards don't defend.
They see themselves in one dimension.
It's how they see them, yeah. It just gives the coach more tools to understand the kid or the player and try to help work them through the process into being a more complete player.
Right.
So I don't know how the percentages work out. I'd still say you're spending most of your time dealing with the first dimension, to be honest. Because it just takes a lot of time and repetition. But the most critical time may be the 5% that you're dealing with the character or the third dimension, because that is foundational and underpins everything else. And I think that gets into what Erik talks about with the culture. because the time they spend on developing their culture is constant. It's always there. And then they spend probably 85, 90% of their time working on the physical. Is that close to right, Erik?
Absolutely. Again, referencing what drives winning, referencing all the it's almost 100%. When you look at what drives success in a program, it's culture. And the culture is based on relationships. It's the most important piece. So again, results, relationships, process, results, almost to a T. Caledonia football here in Minnesota has the longest winning streak in the country. Right? They've been undefeated for maybe like 6 seasons now. They had their season cut short from COVID, so they didn't get to defend their title, so to speak. But Mark Esch wrote a book called Rise of the Warriors. It's about the culture at Caledonia football and what they've created there. It's all about the culture, which comes back to relationships. And I think Cal is talking about character and identity. And I think identity is crucial because it's a big issue in our culture. Is our student athletes, our athletes are struggle with identity. That's one of the biggest issues that we have. And Cal talked about, most of our players identify themselves as athletes, specific athletes. I'm a Denfeld hunter. I'm a running back. Those are identity issues. And what we're trying to flip is that you're a person first over a player. And that's what drives winning really hammers home, is he gets these athletes to work through that identity piece and to see that we identify them as just players, then their athletic success drives their identity, and which then leads to self-worth, right?
Which is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Your life is going to be depression, drug use, physical abuse, suicide, all the things that we struggle with in the public school, private school, high school, college, pros are a derivative of finding our identity in the wrong things.
Or it can lead to being just an arrogant jerk.
Well, yeah. You
know, I'm better than you.
Yep. And so I think it's really getting first.
Prove it.
It starts with the coach, and the coach has to go through this journey first and understand who they are. Because I think what happens, there's a grid that I use, high competency, high character leads to unlimited growth. High competency, low character is the potential for unlimited harm. And that's what a lot of coaches are highly competent, but have low character. And so they have the potential to do unlimited harm to a student athlete. And we've seen that happen. So getting the coach to go through this 3D process, to go through inside out, to really understand who they are as a coach, to come up with a purpose. We call it the transformational purpose statement. Minnesota State High School League makes each coach come up with this in a module now. So they're using the same language of inside out. Get coaches to do this journey first, so that when they have these relationships with players, they see them as people first. And that's what these kids need. They need to be loved and cared for as a person, not just as a player. And unfortunately, there's more transactional coaches than transformational. Now, you talked about your college coach was a transformational coach from the way you talk about them. One of the things we did with our ADs and one of the things we do with our coaches when we go through 3D is, who's a coach in your life that has had the greatest impact on you? When I did it, all the coaches that have had the greatest impact were negative impacts. So not really having a coach who was transformational. Now, there are coaches that, in hindsight, again, probably cared about me, but I never received that affirmation. It was more of the praise, and it was based off of being a player and not a person. So
yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because Barry was very transformational for me, and still is. I mean, he's still someone that I can talk to about soccer stuff, and getting even some of the first dimension pieces to elevate us, right? But kind of going, to the youth side of it. How so basically what you both are saying is to dabble in a little bit of all three. And maybe when you're first starting out, maybe you are laying down that brick of creating the culture. And that would be in this third dimension of developing the core and how we're going to operate and how we're going to carry ourselves and how we're going to do this and how we're going to do that. And then maybe the next season, and you're still doing a little X's and O's, but that's not like the main part of it. So again, we've talked about this on all three of the episodes so far, but is going along with the process. How do you get someone that is impatient like myself and make it so we're still okay with following the process?
I think it does take time. I mean, you think about the amount of change you may need to change. So if you're looking at culture, you're going to have to change your language. I mean, language is what culture's based on.
Mm.
So you have to assess what language do you want to use. Fear-based motivation or love-based motivation. That's different language. Then you got to say, what are our norms? And norms are the unwritten rules that are enforced by the inmates, so to speak. The players, they enforce the norms. The norms here are we're in a weight room, or we put in extra time. That's the norm. If you don't, somebody's going to let you know, and it's not the coach. It's the players. That's the norms. That's a big part of culture. Well, we don't do that here. And then it's, who are the heroes? The heroes are the people who embody the values of the organization. So you think about who are the heroes in sport that you want to highlight. You pick the ones in your sport. And some of them are positive and some of them aren't. So you can highlight and tell the stories of the ones that are reinforcing the values you want to develop in your culture. And then the last thing would be, what are your traditions? And traditions are the means of transferring those, of moving the culture from generation to generation. So after 4 years, it's your team. Everybody's been under your leadership, and that's the culture you've built, whether you like it or not. I think when you start talking about the culture, then you need a comprehensive perspective, and it's going to take time. It'll take you 3 or 4 years to get what you want.
Mommy.
That's my.
It's mommy.
I mean, I know a coach over in Superior. He's after the 4th year, he goes, "Oh, this is my team. All these kids, I've been the only high school coach they've had. So it's on me now."
Yeah.
Can't blame anybody else.
Right.
So you gotta. So I think that's kind of a backdrop to what Erik's working through in his 2nd year. I think he's seen tremendous progress. He said the seniors this year bought in. It was last year's they didn't.
Right.
So now next year's seniors probably are going to be in.
It's again going up just one level each time. That's what I've noticed when I first started at Denfeld as well.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, I think what the question Brandon asked too is like, I wouldn't, not so much dabbling. I would say it comes back to what Cal said is, do you realize that the game demands that you coach in all 3 dimensions? Like you can't skimp on one. You can't just say, well, 60% of the time or 80% of the time I'm going to be a first dimensional coach, and when I have time, I'll get the 2nd and 3rd dimension in. That's not how it works, unfortunately. Most coaches, again, are very proficient in the first dimension. A lot of coaches get their jobs because they're very proficient in the first dimension. They are offensive gurus or defensive gurus, or they're innovative. Very, very few coaches are at the higher levels are getting hired because they're great 3-dimensional coaches. There are great 3-dimensional coaches for sure, but I think that's what we're trying to get out to coaches who are maybe struggling a little bit because they don't know how to address some of these issues. And we're saying, well, It's because you're only coaching in one dimension. And like you said it at the beginning, and this is definitely the truth. It starts in the third dimension. That's what a lot of people, it is backwards. We introduce things the way we even did the podcast is 1, 2, 3, right? Because that's how it works. But it's really 3.
Yeah.
Three is it. And if you don't realize that, that's why, again, the percentages that we share with coaches is how few coaches are actually three-dimensional coaches. And you can't have the mindset that, I'm a great offensive guy and I'm just going to let Joe, he's going to deal with all the second dimension stuff. You can maybe get away with that for a while, but on the long term, especially as the head coach who's creating culture, it demands all 3 dimensions. And again, when you go through the course work a little bit, or you go through the journey with us, one of the slides Cal does is he flips it to where the heart is the main circle. Like it's all about the heart. And so understanding that, for us, the third dimension is the most important.
Well,
Absolutely.
If your program, so like Erik's program, it's an expression of what's in his heart. So he is the one that's curating everything about the heart. The other coaches can't do it in the same way. If you're an assistant coach and you're doing that, people know that about you, and they like that, but they know the head coach doesn't give a rip. Head coach is about this, something else. So kids figure that out really fast. So the head coach is the driver.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, like, let's just jump on soccer. Where does soccer demand love? And how is it expressed in soccer? And if love is defined as sacrifice for the benefit of others, where does soccer demand players sacrifice to benefit their teammates?
Well, sharing the ball, the ball. Working together.
Yeah. How about creating space?
You
got to make a run. You have to make yourself available, an option, right?
Mm-hmm. My dad always told me this, that the most important player on the field is the player without the ball.
Yeah, but maintaining shape, communication,
discipline.
It's everywhere in the game. So if you're not addressing love and connecting it to all the activities downstream, you're missing a big opportunity of teaching kids how to love one another. Mm-hmm. So if we can't share the ball, you're like, well, you don't say, how come we can't share the ball? You say, how come we don't love each other? How come you're not willing to learn how to pass the ball to the proper side of the player so that they can get it without getting wrapped up by that defender, right? It's a simple thing. Just move the ball to the right side, the correct side.
And again, I feel like it does come down to that terminology piece. We talked about it in the
language. That's language.
The language piece of it, right?
Yeah.
We have to make sure that we're all on the same page on how we speak to each other. So, if I'm a first time coach, I've never coached a sport before in my life. I've played here and there. What are some tools that you would give to a first time coach that's never coached before in their life? And what's the first thing that you would equip them with?
Inside Out Coaching, the book, would be the first thing. I'd buy a copy for them and I would put it in their hands and say, read this, and then
work through it together.
Yeah, and then let's talk about it.
So what they need is a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
They need feedback. So it's kind of like being a student teacher. Somebody who knows how to coach should actually watch them coach. Mm-hmm. And soccer actually does a really good job in their licensure process. Mm-hmm. You have to practice coaching and you get feedback from master coaches. Soccer has the formula built in. Baseball doesn't do that. It's a different system in baseball. But, that's the system or the approach. It's there, but it's also then, can you include or understand the third dimension and include that in the process?
Yeah, you'd want to used or thought about this model with RBA again, having a three-dimensional coach, somebody that we recognize as a coach who teaches in third dimension. And if you go through our 3D program, you're a certified 3D coach in the sense that you completed the course.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like Cal said, then you enter into it's almost like being an apprentice. And when I worked at the grocery store and I was in the meat department, I was an apprentice meat cutter. and I had to work so many hours before with a master meat cutter before I was certified to be able to work kind of on my own. It's the same mentorship, apprenticeship where I think we're just really bad at this as a culture in everything we do. And the language that we use in FCA is discipled, that you're a learner and who are you learning from? And if we put coaches out there to mentor and teach younger coaches who are not 3D coaches, then we're just going to multiply bad coaches. I think that's the excitement of 3D coaching in FCA is we want to multiply 3D coaches who want to go out and multiply themselves. I share this with, imagine if, one 3D coach works with 3 coaches, right? New coaches in our area. And they go through that. And then those 3 coaches go and work. Each one of those coaches then takes another 3 coaches. And then you have exponential growth. Mm-hmm. You could change, and this is what they talk about with coaching trees, right? So great NFL football coach, or he has a coaching tree. He has a lineage of coaches, and you could tie one coach to 15. And so I think that's the excitement a little bit of, if I'm a brand new coach, or if I'm hiring a coach as a head coach and he's brand new, then he's not going to be by himself. I guarantee that. Right. He's going to be working with somebody who I really trust, and they're going to learn. If that even means putting that coach to a lower level. Hey, you're going to get paid as a varsity coach, but you're going to be working with the C team this year because Joe really needs a mentor. Mm-hmm. If you can establish that sort of coaching culture where we're discipling, mentoring, apprenticing coaches, man, you could really do some neat things. And you kind of see it a little bit in basketball in our area with a lot of younger coaches kind of coming up who are excited about growth mindset, that are excited about process. And if they're going through 3D and they're training their staff, like you go through 3D, and this is something you've already talked about. So, you want to train your staff so you can eventually send them, either replace you so you can go do something different. Mm-hmm. Or you can send them to another school, and then they train a staff, and then they send them out to another school. You could transform Northeast Minnesota in 10 years through 1 or 2 coaches. That, to me, that's crazy exciting.
Beyond the Bench is provided by MOTI Sports. MOTI Sports is the ultimate youth soccer training tool, utilizing 3D motion capture technology to teach soccer skills and drills that can be studied from any angle. Coaches, parents, and players can download the MOTI Sports mobile app from the Apple App Store and Google Play. Check us out at motisports.com.
I've been at Denfeld 7 seasons now, and I think there's only been 2 years where I've had the same JV coach, and a lot of those JV coaches are now either coaching varsity teams or they're off in their current job where they're excelling and being able to take, and they were able to use in their resume that they were a head JV coach or a co-head JV coach so that they could propel themselves in their field that they really wanted. And that's what we're trying, I tell this to all my players as well. We do individual meetings at the end of every year. And one of the things that I take from them is the same mindset that I coach the same way, and I want to be coached the same way by my players. So there's that relationship that they're able to come and talk to me about, maybe things that I'm deficient in, and being able to build that relationship. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that a part of the core of being able to develop that relationship in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's a why. That's a why I coach moment. Mm-hmm. That's an inside out question of why do I coach the way I coach? Mm-hmm. And that's part of that process. What does it feel like to be coached by me? And you have to answer those questions and be brutally honest with yourself, because those are the exit questions you're going to have with your seniors when they leave.
Yeah.
What did it feel like to be coached? Like if they had to explain to another person what it felt like, what are they going to say? Or what do you hope they would say? Because that ties into your transformational purpose statement. That's the meaning of success. that's the win ultimately, is especially at our level where kids are graduating and they're not going to play college soccer or college football, college basketball. They're going to college, or they're going right into the workforce, or they're going into the military. And they're going to be shaped by experiences that they had on your team, and they're going to be impacted either positively or negatively by the way that you related to them. So that's why the coach has so much influence now. And even as an assistant, I can't tell you how many reference letters I've given to bosses for, that our former student athletes are applying for a job, or that I've had guys text me, hey, can I use you as a reference on my application? Or, hey, will you write a recommendation for my scholarship application? Like those are the sorts of things as a coach that if those things are happening to you, then you know that you're achieving, at least for me personally, I'm achieving success, because my players are coming back to me after graduation and asking me life questions or getting advice or asking for references. Then you know you've had a tremendous impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember my very first meeting, my very first parents meeting. And I remember talking about how my team is going to be one of the fittest teams in the section. And I would say probably every girl that's graduated has gotten into CrossFit and has gotten into like some type of fitness based thing. And I'm like, I did it. I did it. Now they are as fit as they can possibly be in life.
Yeah, you talk about trust, and that's evidence of trust. Like if they didn't trust you or didn't experience those results, then they wouldn't do it. So that's part of, hey, coach actually knew what he was talking about. I think there's those aha moments for a lot of student athletes too, is because I was that kid who, always second guessed the coach, and I always thought I knew better. And in hindsight, coach really knew what he's talking about. And so that's why sometimes when you define success, you don't know how successful you were until 15 years down the road. For me, when I started coaching again, it was humbling, because I went back with both basketball and football to coaches that I played for and coaches that I had conflict with in high school. And so to come back and to say to them, hey, you know what? You actually knew what you were talking about, or, man, I was a punk. Those are things that kids ultimately realize too. But that's why character is a huge piece. If you are low character and you're highly competent, like most coaches are highly competent, but are low character, then unlimited harm can be done. If you're high character, high competency, unlimited growth, and that growth happens when Joey turns 25 and realizes what coach said makes sense. Or so that's long-term 3D successes in my book.
Yeah, planting seeds for sure. And I think that's why we get into coaching in the first place. Everyone says you don't get into coaching for money, especially youth based. Like, it's not there. That's not what you're doing. You're there because you love the sport, or you really love your kids and you want to help them as best you can. And they're saying like, oh, hey Cal, go coach girls soccer at U6. Like, go ahead, And you saw what Sonia was doing, and you're like, no, every kid needs a ball. Give them all a ball and make them do it. It's a part of it. So recognizing those pieces for sure. So we've had a lot of time to be able to talk about the first dimension, the second dimension, and now the third dimension. And so how do you wrap all of this up in a nice bow? How do you tell a coach, okay, so here's all the pieces. How do you put it all together and make you the best version of yourself in this arena?
I think of a assistant baseball coach I had in high school. I would say he loved the game, he knew the game, he could teach the game, and he loved me. How's that?
I love it. Again, I can relate to that. Yeah. I'll never forget my youth coach. I'll never forget him, because I followed him everywhere. And he let me, and he wanted to be there. He He made sure to speak right. He made sure to continue to influence in a positive way. I felt loved. I felt pushed, and yet I felt that I could continue to grow as an individual, and that I was, he was teaching me so much in like life of like what's happening and that, and how to cope with stress and how to do this and how to do that. It was so cool. Loved it. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate all of this, and I know that our listeners are going to love this because they need something to put their coaching minds at ease. They need to know that they're not alone and that there's more than just the X's and O's. There's more to all the pieces. So I think that they're going to really appreciate all of this, and I really appreciate both of your time.
Brandon, if people have response, I'm willing to talk to people, and be a resource. So if you can help them connect with me, that's great.
Incredible insight from Erik and Cal on the 3 dimensions of coaching. Biggest takeaway from me is that you need all 3 dimensions to grow the individual and the team. Special thanks to FCA, and more specifically Erik and Cal, for sharing the 3 dimensions: the physical, the mental, and the heart. Thanks for tuning in. This is Brandon Stemwedel with Beyond the Bench.
Beyond the Bench is sponsored by BiPro, the ideal lifestyle choice for athletes and health enthusiasts, by providing clean protein without artificial ingredients or sugars. Whether you're looking for a pre- or post-workout supplement or a quick drink on the go, visit motisports.com to receive 25% off your next BiPro item.